All right, everyone. I'm so pleased to see you all today. My name is Carter Watts. I use she, her pronouns, and I am coming to you from New York City. So, just a little bit about me. I'm a 2025 graduate of Barnard College of Columbia University, where I majored in urban studies with a concentration in education. I am a student worker at the Barnard Office of Community Engagement and Inclusion and a studio assistant at the Barnard Design Center, which is a multidisciplinary studio makerspace. In my personal work, I am passionate about education, creativity, and honing in and learning from ancestral knowledge. So for my initial project proposal, I was really moved and urged to do work as a result of the past 2 years at Barnard and Columbia being faced with tension and division. Um, the initial goal of the project was to build bridges of connection with participants, addressing feelings of isolation, division, and polarization as a result of current events and division on campus. And my medium for doing this was through writing, art, and sharing stories vocally amongst each other. The project will culminate with the creation of a community quilt made by squares that were hand sewn by participants. So you may be wondering, what is this project? So this project was encapsulated by quilting circles for faculty, students, staff at my college, as well as elderly members of the Morningside Heights community, which is the neighborhood where Columbia and Barnard resides. Um, these quilting squares were really rooted in Black traditions of quilting and storytelling. I was really inspired by the work of Faith Ringgold, whose work is on the slide right now, by Harriet Powers, by quilters in my family. I come from American slaves who did quilting in their lives. So I was really wanting to root this in tradition of quilt making. These squares are currently on display at my campus library and will be assembled into a quilt for display. And why does this matter? I am a firm believer, and I'm sure many of us are firm believers, that community will save us. So, getting together and building our community and sharing our stories is really what will save us during these trying times, especially right now. Two, we must find ways to tell and preserve our stories. We see this in the ways that Black and Indigenous people hand sewed their stories, their messages, their histories into the quilts that they made. And I really want to preserve that method of storytelling in my work. And preserving methods of making helps us connect to their culture. So I mentioned that I'm an American descendant of slaves, and this has really helped me connect with the roots of my family. So for project implementation, like I said, I held multiple quilt circles on campus and in the neighborhood where people could come together and sew quilt squares that directly reflected their experiences and their stories. I partnered with the Barnard Design Center and the Office of Community Engagement and Inclusion to put these on. I also partnered with a community organization called Life Force in Later Years, which is a nonprofit in Morningside Heights, which partners elders in the neighborhood with volunteers to engage them. And I've been working with them for the past 4 years while I've been at Columbia. So I was really happy to be able to make that connection with them as well and have a quilt circle where every participant could make their own square. I also created promotional materials and distributed through newsletters and flyers around campus. And I developed a lesson plan and a resource guide, which included resources such as books, vendors in the city where they could buy sustainably sourced fabric, and quilting centers in the city where people could learn more about the histories of quilting. And I hope that these lesson plans could be utilized in the future, by various centers on my campus. So at the bottom, I just have some keynotes that I was really just trying to hone in on throughout this process. Preparation, I tried to prep at least a few months in advance before these quilt circles happened. Partnerships, just being able to partner with anybody that you may have a connection with, and you never know who might come through the woodwork and you might be able to partner with in the future. Use what you know. So I mentioned that I am a concentration in education. So I was really trying to use my lesson planning skills to create a curricula that would be, that wouldn't fall through and that would work very well. Do research. I was really trying to learn from the histories of Black and Indigenous quilters, so that I could implement what their techniques and their tools that they've learned into my work. And also, this goes along with that, learning from the work of others. So, community quilting doesn't it isn't a recent thing. I'm learning from the AIDS quilt, which is the longest ongoing folklore project. I'm learning from many different quilters that have really inspired me. So here are some photos from the first event that took place. I had about 15 or so participants who all came together. Some of them were students at Barnard in Columbia. Some of them were staff who um, work in the library, work around campus, and some of them were faculty who teach classes at the school. So that was my main goal, was to bring people from all corners of the university, to engage in dialogue, to learn from each other, to learn from the histories presented, and to create something new. Here are some photos from the workshop with Life Force in later years. Something that I really had to hone in on and learn from my personal work as an education concentration working in classrooms is how to pivot quickly when putting on an event. So one problem that we ran into was the dexterity of a lot of the elderly people having to hand sew. And so what we decided was that they would place their shapes onto the squares, pin it, and some students at Barnard ended up sewing them so that they would still have their vision represented on the quilt. They just didn't have to thread a needle, which we all know is a little bit challenging. So moving on to challenges, senior year is crazy. I was writing a thesis. Like I said, I have two campus jobs, and this ended up being a pretty heavy lift. And so being able to maneuver time management and prepping, like I mentioned, very far in advance, ended up working in my favor. Like I mentioned earlier, sewing by hand is a learning curve, especially for us Gen Z. You know, we don't have home ec in our classes. So being able to teach people how to sew, which I'm so lucky to have a team of people who I work alongside who work in teaching people methods of making. So that was very helpful. And spreading the word is challenging, especially with busy college students and faculty who are trying to meet deadlines, who may not have 2.5 hours to sit and sew, but really just honing in on the message that this is important, even if we have essays to write, connecting with other people and with these methods of making is valuable. So here are some quilt squares that some people made, some of the participants. So I can talk a little bit about them. The one on the bottom right with the pomegranate, she was reflecting on how when she was younger, her father cut fruit for her, which is something that a lot of Caribbean and even I'd say communities of color really resonate with. Um, the act of preparing food for one another. And that is how she now shows up for her community, how she shows love to her friends. So that was very heartwarming. The one in the middle on the bottom, the participant was from Asheville, North Carolina. And as a result of the natural disasters that took place this past year there, she's really seen her community show up for each other, and she's really seen beauty in the way that she resonates with her home community, even now living in New York. And on the right, there is a participant who was resonating with her home and her culture and exploring patterns. And on the top, it says love in Urdu. That's just some of the quilt scores that were made. So just touching on the outcomes, several community workshops were attended by faculty, staff, students, and community members. I believe I had about 30 community members who were able to participate in these workshops. Dialogue about personal histories and radical dreams for the future were had, which was beautiful to engage with. There was creative expression through a medium that many participants had never tried before, and a curiosity to see what would happen if they continue to pursue these methods of making, which was beautiful to see. And also 20 squares were hand sewn by participants, which will be sewn together into a quilt. And there will be ripple effects that I'll talk about a little bit. So looking forward, I'm very excited to announce that I'm currently working with the Director of Exhibitions, Programming, and Public Engagement at Barnard to develop an exhibition on African American quilts and quilters. I've never worked in curation or exhibition, so I'm really excited to dip a toe into that space. I've been really interested in learning about what that process looks like. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to learn from and alongside experienced quilters and curators to bridge my interests. The Story We Sew quilt will be on display alongside other pieces that I've made, and alongside quilts made by quilters from around the country. This exhibit will have so much more of a broader impact than my events. So on the left are some of the quilts squares that were created by students and faculty and staff that it's currently on display in the library on campus. There are some more that will be pieced together, and they will all form a community quilt. So I just like to thank the Newman Civic team at Campus Compact. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, Will, for everything. I'd also like to thank my campus mentors, Mary Rocco and Zoe Ross, alongside the Barnard Office of Community Engagement and Inclusion. Thank you everyone who attended, asked questions, helped, and really dug deep to engage in this practice. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at carter.wattspe@gmail.com if you have any questions. Thank you so much.